My name is Kris Nelson. My site is evolveconsciousness.org, and this is a presentation for the Law of Freedom Part 7, Reality Affection. This is part of an ongoing series of presentations into Natural Law, the Science of Morality. Technically, this would be presentation 5 in that series, but because the Law of Freedom was going to be so big, well, I didn't want to make one video, but it's part 5 in the Natural Law Science of Morality series. So let's get into it. So in this presentation, we're going to be talking about concepts related to Ma'at and Isfet, or APEP, which relate to order and chaos. So I figured I'd bring this back in. I talked about it in my presentation on morality and natural law, the science of morality, part 4, morality. This is the same information, but a different background, different infographic. So in the order and chaos, Ma'at is the order, and the chaos is Isfet or APEP. And APEP is also known as Apophis. And this relates to the concept of apophysis. So you can check out that presentation, and you can just look for the slides for Apophis. It's at the beginning where I go into it to explain how Apophis relates to APEP or APOPH and Isis correlated with Ma'at. So APEP and Apophis relates to darkness, void, abyss, destruction. And that's the personification of this snake. It's a dark god, not a light god or goddess. It's a dark god represented by a snake. And this correlates with the conception, the cosmic conception of Isfet, which is chaos, injustice, evil, immorality, entropy, involution. And juxtaposed to that, the positive force is Ma'at, the goddess, which you see here with the sword of truth and the scales of Ma'at, the balance of Ma'at, and the wings of Ma'at, representing light, existence, creation. And that correlates with the concept of Ma'at, not the goddess, because it's a force, a concept in the ancient Egyptian philosophy. And that relates to order and justice and good, morality, syntropy, and evolution. And here I have her standing on a plinth or mound of creation, as that's how some of the creation, the mythopoetic creation epics, is that Ma'at is the mound that the earth was created on. Because Ma'at, along with Heka, which represented magic, was these were two of the foundational forces in the universe, Ma'at and Heka. So order and magic. And in the backdrop of order is chaos. That's the void, the abyss, the nothingness, and then you have light and existence and creation. Hence the logos of the Bible, let there be light. So that's what this is correlating. And now we can talk about the scales of Ma'at, which Ma'at holds up in that image, but the scales of Ma'at are found, their scales are balance of Ma'at in the Hall of Judgment. So in the underworld, when someone would die, you go into the Hall of Judgment. And the Hall of Judgment would contain the scales, which was, I think, watched over by Anubis. And there was Thoth, who was the scribe of the gods, who would write things down as they were processing in the judgment of the individual. And there was Amit, a 4-part monster creature thing. I think it's hippopotamus, body, an alligator face, and I forget. I think there's a lion in there somewhere. Might just be 3. Maybe there's 4. I forget what the whole construction was, but nonetheless, the point of the scales were that when you die, well, you get judged, and that's represented by who you are is your heart, the core essence of being, which was on one side of the scale. And this represented your desires and your cares and your drive, and ultimately your actions and deed, which result from those desires and cares and that drive. Whatever motivates you is where you're going to end up acting out. And on the right side, we have the feather of Ma'at. So Ma'at's feather of truth and justice, because that's what Ma'at represented, was truth, justice, order, good, morality, etc. So the feather is light. It's not heavy. So it's light, but also Ma'at represented light, as opposed to darkness, which was the corollary for Apep, Apophis, doing battle with Apophis. Apep was Ma'at, representing the force of light. But a feather is also light, as in it's not heavy. So it has that dual meaning with the singular word of light. So that's moral truth. Ultimately, it's not just truth in general, it's moral truth, hence justice. So you have a heart weighed against a feather, and the goal is to be 1 and 1 in balance, right? I have it here. 1 and 1. They have to be equal. They have to be balanced. And if you're not in balance, that means your heart is heavier. Well, then you're heavier than the lightness that you're supposed to be in matching your heart, your core essence of being, your desires, your cares, your drive, and your actions and your deeds are supposed to equal living in moral truth. And if they're not, then you're weighed down. So here I have a little more of an explanation. And so the scales balance of Ma'at in the Hall of Judgment, or also referred to as Ma'ati and Ma'ati, known as the two truths. So the two truths, you can relate it to many different things. Truth and justice, as in follow the truth or follow the way of moral truth, or face the consequences of justice that comes about as a failure to do that. And it could also be the two truths of the path of good and the path of evil. So follow the moral truth, the path of good, and if you don't follow moral truth and you go on the path of evil, then you could potentially face justice. So the scale is weighing, judging, and testing. It's testing what you did in your life, what your desires and your care, what you cared about that drove you to do what you did. And then you're being judged because you're being weighed against the feather. These concepts of weighing, judging, and testing relate to this process of being judged for your actions. And Ma'at. Creating or supporting evil or immorality weighs you down. You have a heavy heart. When you're heavy-hearted, you're being heavier than the feather of moral truth. The heart is viewed as the fountain of man's deeds. So that's what the heart was viewed as, is that it's the fountain for your deeds, because it's the source from where your deeds come from, ultimately what you care enough about. You can have many thoughts of things, but only what you ultimately care about and that you desire will drive you and motivate you into an action towards what you care about or what you desire about. So that could be for the good or the evil. Hence the two truths, the paths that we can take. So this is the driving motivational source of will and actions. Did you take in moral truth? Did you align, harmonize, and equalize to it at a 1-to-1 ratio? Then you're in equilibrium or balance with moral truth, with Ma'at. Your individual core the heart, or your essence, has welcomed the universal essence of moral truth, ma'at, you have true care. Caring for moral truth, leading to moral actions. You're in equilibrium with moral truth. So the future, what comes after, the future life rewards that you get, after everything after right now is the future that hasn't happened. And when it does happen, well, that's what comes, right? You live by a certain way, you have desires and cares, and that drives and motivates you to engage in certain behavior. And then that behavior will create results in the world, and that will be what is created. But before it's created, it's the future. So your heart is going to lead to the future afterlife rewards you get. Hence, the symbolism of being judged after you die. It's all symbolism. So the life after you die is, so there's a lot of layers of symbolism to this. The dying is the hero's journey, where you do the shadow work within and you face the things within you that are wrong, the darkness, the shadow, the evil, the immorality, the demons. So you have a lot of artwork in esotericism, in many traditions, that have slaying the serpent, or slaying the dragon, or standing on the dragon, or riding the dragon, things like that. And that's taming, or slaying, or rising above the lower natures, the things that are in you that maybe you can sublimate and remove, but most likely they're going to remain, but you're just going to choose not to have them drive you, not your lower natures drive you. You're going to seek higher aspirations, higher desires, and higher cares to motivate your behavior in life. So you've risen above them, and you've tamed those lower desires, and you've put them to death, so to speak. So these future or afterlife rewards or consequences are based on past life actions, which is what I just explained. So we put to death what fails to align with ma'at, with truth, with justice, with good, with morality. Karma is action or deed, as I went through in previous parts of this Law of Freedom presentation series. You can take a look at that. And, I think it was the past 3 dealing with karma. What happens as a result of your actions? Are you serving good or evil? Live by moral truth, ma'at, and uphold the positive side of justice, or go against morality and get negative justice by creating evil. So as I explained in the previous parts of the Law of Freedom, and we'll see even in more detail, this is the point of this presentation. I have a flow chart to diagram it and show it in more detail, that you're getting justice either way. The laws of nature operate at all times. It's just depending on your behaviors, you're going to get a positive or negative outcome. Like if you jump off of something tall, well, you could not jump off of something tall. And based on the choices you make, the behavior will produce certain results. And if you jump off of a high place, you're likely going to get hurt. So those are negative consequences you're getting within the operation of the laws of the universe. And you can refer to that as how the law of gravity operates. Or however you want to, if you don't want to use the word gravity, call it whatever you want. Basically, you go up, you come down, right? Everyone generally understands that. Well, however that's happening, you want to argue about it, that's not the point. And if you choose not to jump, well then the positive consequence is that you're going to not be harmed. So the same with morality and justice through the law of freedom. Aggregate morality creates aggregate freedom. Aggregate immorality creates aggregate enslavement. So the choices we make are going to give us an overall positive result or an overall negative result. And I've gone into that in previous parts of the series if you want to take a look at that. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because we have 1-1, a balance, right? The scales are two, one on one side, one on the other side. And we have the Hall of Mahdi, the two truths, truth and justice, good and evil, these concepts that are related. And justice in the tarot is represented, as I've shown with Ma'at in the previous infographic, with Ma'at, with the sword and the balances. So you could look at her as the originator of the concept of the Tarot Justice card, card 11. So hence again, 11. What is 11? Well, 11 is 1-1. So 1-1, you remove the ratio, a 1-to-1 ratio. Well, that's what the number 11 also represents symbolically. And that's what the Tarot Justice card is card 11. So you see how all these concepts are connected in terms of the symbolism of one thing on one side. The heart needs to balance one thing on the other side, the feather of truth and justice of Ma'at. So that's what the scales are about. That's continued in the generations of humanity, the future lives of people who've been born afterwards, and created actions and behaviors that led to making the world as it was, and led to making that world that new people were born into, and perpetuate that for thousands of years. And so we have the symbolism of the scales. We have the symbolism of the sword. The sword is the defensive side, and it's also the justice punishing side when the judgment happens. And again, when you have 11, well, that's 1 and 1 on 1 and 1. Well, that's, you can look at it as two pillars. So the two pillars of enlightenment, this is from my morality presentation. The left-hand pillar is the self-defense principle, the sacred masculine. And the right-hand pillar is the non-aggression principle, the sacred feminine. And those correlate with concepts of will and thelema. In Greek, and thelema is will, and in Greek, agape is love, but it's the higher form of love. And that's why I put care, because it's true care. I didn't put love, even though that's what it translates as, to not confuse it with what most people associate with love. So it's the higher form of love, care, a true, higher, all caps, care. So in the self-defense principle, well, I'll start with the default first, the passive side, the non-aggression. You care for right over wrong, to not initiate harm, do the least harm you can because you can. You don't violate rights, non-violence, don't do or support evil. And that's the lost word. And you say no. You know to you creating evil. So that's do no harm. And on the left side is the sacred masculine. Defend yourself and your rights. You act, you stand up, you speak truth, you respond to the initiated harm. So you don't allow harm. The right side is don't do harm, and the left side is, well, you don't want to allow the harm. You respond to the initiated harm. You deal with violence. You enact justice. This is the last word. You smack down the evil. This is saying no to others doing evil, as opposed to just you doing evil. So this deals with reciprocity and balance. And we could look at two pillars of balance: the good or the evil. As I mentioned, the two truths, the path of good and the path of evil. So you live by moral truth, or you face negative consequences. And hence the saying of truth or consequence. Well, that's based on choosing the path of good, or if you choose the path of evil, then face negative consequences. So we have a positive potential, Ma'at, and a negative potential, Isfet. The positive potential is if you want to be treated by others a certain way, then treat them that way. It's a benefit, ideally. Or it can be a harm. If you like the harm and you want to be harmed, like people into, I guess, sadism, or I don't know what it's called. You like to be hurt. So, you could apply this in a flawed way. I'm just trying to be more specific. That's why I put or harm. It's benefit ideally, but you could be like, oh, well, I want to be treated, I want to be harmed in this way, so I'm going to treat others in that way. So I'm going to get this positive, I view it as a positive, which is harm to me. So anyways, people can twist this. So it's not the proper way to follow it. But we'll just stop the semantics there and we'll go to the right side. So the negative potential is if you don't want to be treated by others a certain way, then don't treat them that way. Otherwise, if you do treat them in that negative way, then they could reciprocate that and bring back balance to your negative actions as a karma brought back to you. So that's the negative potential. And I've gone into this a bit in the past 3 presentations on karma. And this is otherwise known as the golden rule, or the law of attraction. Karma, behavioral cause and effect. You reap what you sow, and you give to get. So if you give good, well, you hope to get back good. And if you give, sorry about that, I keep hitting plate on my desk. If you give the negative, if you give immorality, then don't be surprised to get back harm. If you give harm, if you initiate harm, then you're probably going to receive harm back. You're not going to receive back immorality. You're going to be receiving back karma and balance and justice for your immorality that you initiated. So I've gone into this before, how it works in the karma. I think it was part 4 was the one that had the most detail. Part 5 too. So if you respect the right of others, then you get your rights respected. If you don't respect their rights, then you don't get yours respected. If you violate rights, then you nullify your own right to be free from harm and consequence. At an individual level, reciprocity as the law of attraction is a potential. It's not a guarantee that you're going to get what you give out. You're not guaranteed to receive, to reflect back to you, the same positive or negative that you put out. But in the aggregate, the majority of behavior reflects back as the condition we live. This is according to the law of freedom. It's the condition we all live in, because the majority creates that condition that we all live in. So this is the original one I made in 2014, so 11 years ago. It's called Reality Affection. That's the title of this presentation. Damn, that is bright. The contrast. So the reality affection, the reason it's called reality affection, as you can see at the bottom here, it's reality is affected by our behavior. But it's also affection because, see, it's in the shape of a heart. So when you have affection for something, that's because you care about it, right? This is all about what we care about, underlies everything. Is the whole motto here behind all of natural law, is to have true care. Because what you care, your drives, hence the scales, is what is going to drive your behavior. And whether it's in balance with moral truth or not, well, that's your choice and what you choose to enact as your behavior. So this is the original I made. And I was looking at it and I'm like, well, it's not specific enough. So we have here the left-hand path and the right-hand path. We have the hands in the background. I have care in the middle of the heart in the background. So I wanted to remake it to be more specific. So I won't go into it here. You can pause and take a look, or go to the infographic in this presentation, or on my site. I have it there in the previous presentation years ago. You can take a look. And here I had a rough design of the new one, what it would look like. So I just wanted to show that. But it got more detailed and more refined as I developed it into more infographics, and it ended up taking a lot more space than it did there. That one was a rough overview, but the finalized one has a lot more information. So where does it start, right? The initial reality affection is when we're talking about the negative side, right? Because we're interested in our condition of our enslavement that we've created through our aggregate actions. And we're also interested in the immorality individuals do. So that's why this starting one is the starting red box here, where there's free will, moral, causal agents. And that's beings with, as a causal agent, you have free will, and a causal agent means you have a high enough level of consciousness to understand, be capable of understanding the concept of morality, of right and wrong, definitively, and be able to communicate about it. So I call them free will, moral, causal agents. Humans belong to that category, and abbreviated as FWMCA. So these are the violators in the red box. They are free will, moral, causal agents, but they are violators. So I have the thought, emotion, action upside down because they're doing immorality. They're inverted. That's the Isfet is also inversion. The inversion concept. And so a violation is created. They initiated harm. Violence, wrong, immorality, evil, chaos. And they're sowing effects into reality. So you can't have immorality unless someone's affected. So the reality affection, how it's affecting reality, is also affecting others. So there's a reaping happening where the effects that others created into reality are received as a reaping on other people who aren't in a red box. They're in a green box. They're just as free will, moral, causal agents who are violated. So the red is when you're a violator, the green is just a neutral, as that force potential within you, that consciousness being as a free will, moral, causal agent. So these are, I'm just putting 3 as an example. It could be 3, it could be 300, 3 billion. So they're violated. There's a personal injustice created. And then we need to ask, well, okay, so that happened to you, right? That was done. Now, how and what are they aggregately sowing in response? So they can engage in behaviors as well. The ones that are violated can engage in behaviors and do sowing of their own to affect reality. So how are they aggregately sowing, and what are they aggregately sowing? And the what would be, are they engaging in self-defense? Or are they just being passive and taking it? And then the how would be, well, how are they enacting that? How are they engaging in the behavior? They're tolerating, accepting, even supporting the immorality being done to them? Or are they fighting against it by trying to educate others about what's going on, understand core principles, so that potentially making the violators physically stop by force could potentially happen if it doesn't happen through education alone. So here we get to the response. So at the top is those free will, moral, causal agents who are violated. How and what are we aggregately sowing in response? Because it's not just them, it's all of us together. Because the concept of it's freedom for all or freedom for none in terms of true freedom. So as one being suffers, we all suffer. That's that same understanding. So the top was the first box is the continuation of the previous infographic where everyone's violated, but then they're part of all free will, moral, causal agents. And we're all potential responders to violations. It's not just those who are violated who are in this. There's other people in reality who can also care about injustices being created and act to rectify them or make them stop. Hence, that's the goal of what we need to do in our world, is to come together and get people to fight either through the information war at first, and eventually to make others stop if they don't want to stop through us saying no or trying to convince them. Eventually, physical defense is required. So all of us together, we're responders. So we have free will choice and we have care. Now, how we're going to use our free will choice, again, is based on that heart, the symbol of the heart, our desires, our cares, what drives us and motivates us. That's our affection to affect reality, the motivation and the drive. So our affection, our care, is going to affect reality based on that care and what we choose as behavior. So we have a left-hand path and a right-hand path. And this is the how. How are we aggregately sowing in response? Well, we can care for truth, and we can have unity with truth and morality, and we can engage in right action. And what action we output will be that we reciprocate karmic debt. We engage in a rectification process. So the karmic debt that is accrued by those who are violating, well, we can reciprocate that harm as a deterrent. So you hit me, well, I'm going to hit you back. Show you, hey, don't do that. I'm not just going to take it. So that applies in different ways where there's a reciprocation. This is the balancing of returning the karma, not letting the negative karma stay at those who were violated, but returning the karma back to the violators to say no with teeth, the sacred masculine principle, and make them stop. So this is where chaos of evil, not tolerated. It's not accepted, not condoned, not normalized, not standardized. And that goes in as input into the reality processing mechanism of all the laws of nature. Right? Everything that's allowed to happen happens because there are laws of nature which make it allowed. I can't, go like this and make my hand turn into a cat, and then I don't have fingers anymore. Now I have a cat as a hand. That's not how the laws of nature work. So, as a corollary, contradistinction to the right-hand path, we have the left-hand path. So there's a lack of care of moral truth. It could be apathy or dark care. I've gone into that in my presentation for Funnel 4, truly caring about being enslaved. So there's lack of care for moral truth, a disunity from natural law, where we engage in wrong action. Again, could be apathy, or it could be dark care because you want. You know what you're doing, and you're going to do it, even though you know it's wrong. And as a result, we don't reciprocate karmic debt. There's no rectification. So forget that last 10 seconds. This is about only the lack of care, where it's our response to what we're going to do about being violated or others being violated. Well, there's a lack of care for moral truth. So we're disunited from natural law. Even if we know it ourselves, we could be limited in what we can do physically. But we can do the great work of teaching natural law. And that wouldn't be a right action. But we're still disunited in our ability to enact it, because we would just be a fly getting squashed, and it would be meaningless, our action to try to oppose this huge force all by ourselves as one person. So there's things we can do, which is the great work to try to bring about that force of numbers, a quantity required so that things can change. That's all according to the law of freedom. The aggregate changes, then the reality will change based on the aggregate of people, whatever direction they go in, whether it's to the path of good, more of the good, or more of the evil. So when we have lack of care, well, we don't reciprocate karmic debt, and there's no rectification. So that's how things got to where they are now. And the chaos of evil is tolerated, accepted, condoned, normalized, and standardized. And that's what we have now. That's what government is. That's what the belief in authority is. It's been like this for thousands of years, where they violate rights of individuals, and it's tolerated, accepted, condoned, and it's normalized and standardized as the way of living in a society. And there's some societies that can be more or less towards the good, or more or less towards the evil in their alignment. But everywhere, there's not true freedom. So us doing this, of tolerating or not tolerating it, well, that would mean the inaction is an action, is an action of non-action. It's still an action. And the action of not tolerating it, well, either way, that's what reality receives. So if someone creates a violation and then you're negatively affected, so you have a negative karma on you, because it's just an action or deed, and the consequences, so the consequences on you that it's a negative. Now the karma stays with you, and that's the karma we have, is that we're tolerating it. So it's staying with us because we're not sending it back. And that's the way the law of freedom operates. Because the law of freedom is going to take, well, are people going to have the action of inaction, or are they going to have the action of doing something? And all these things are permitted by the laws of the universe. And the law of freedom is the description, is a categorization for the application of this process related to the morality of our behavior, leading to freedom, greater or lesser degrees of freedom, or greater or lesser degrees of slavery, overall in the aggregate of society. So again, we cared enough, or we didn't care enough, in action or action. Right? We didn't care enough, that's an inaction. We cared enough, we took action. So in the law of freedom, that's the input, is our behaviors, and reality is just going to process that behavior as whatever we engage in, that manifests in reality, and then there's changes in reality. That's the output that we generate, but it's generating through the laws of nature that allow it to be possible. If it wasn't possible, it wouldn't be happening. So slavery is possible, and it's only created by the choice of free will beings, whether they have the moral causal agent capacity or not. So the output is, again, the right-hand path or the left-hand path. And the right-hand path is based on caring enough, and we're not going to tolerate it. So the right-hand path is order reciprocity. This is the Ma'at symbolism. So we're aligning with Ma'at, or we are aligning with Apep or Isfet in our behaviors. But the result that we get is also going to be based on our alignment. So we're going to get that order reciprocity, that it's going to create order, it's going to restore order. The violations are not going to be tolerated, so a chaos was created, but we're going to restore it. An injustice was created, and we're going to bring back by justice. We're going to bring back the norm of justice. We're going to bring back freedom by applying consequences and getting a repayment for the debt. So that creates personal justice, and justice is enacted, and evil is kept at bay. Freedom is preserved in an area. Order, aggregate karma, is what manifests in the aggregate. So an individual was violated, or a group of people violated, then you bring back justice for that individual or that group of people. So this is the conduction of direct negative karmic consequences feedback to violators. It's localized karma. Oh, I forgot to clean up my infographic and get rid of the delayed and near instant or delayed. Because I was mulling that over, and then I decided to get rid of them, but then I left it in as like, maybe I'll figure out a way to make more sense of it. And yeah, apologies for that. So this is an individual reaping and I've gone into this in more detail, this specific part in terms of the concept and the terminology of karma. So the individual reaping is when what was sent back to the violators, the violatees, the people who were violated by the violators, well, the violators get sent back a consequence. And it's direct negative karmic consequences that are feedback. It's not a one-way street that just goes from them to the violated. It's a 1-to-1 ratio where the negative was created and then it's sent back so that they can feel the negative and they can have consequences applied as a deterrent to not do it, and potentially as a debt collection, a debt repayment mechanism. So the karma is localized. Instead of the karma, negative karma is created to someone who's violated, and then it's sent back localized here. Now, if you don't engage in that process of returning the negative that was received, that was initiated by the violators, and then you're going to return it, it localizes it in the end. So that there was a negative karma created here, the negative consequences that you felt that, but it was returned. So it ends up being localized. This is what I mean by the localized karma. So I hope that's not too confusing. Now, if we didn't care enough, and we go in the left-hand path, where chaos reciprocity. So because chaos was created, and then chaos remains, and then they keep creating it because there's no negative sent back to get them to stop. So they can just keep doing it, and they're just going to keep doing it. Hence, the world we have now, which does have some justice mechanism, but it's very flawed because people are ignorant of morality. And that's the whole reason it's here in the first place, as a controlling mechanism, because people don't want personal responsibility and they don't want to engage in self-control and self-mastery. You know, that's the tarot one card, the magician. Self-mastery, self-governance, self-dominion, enlightenment. People lack that because they don't have the knowledge. They weren't taught. Everything, parents fail them, education fails them. They're not being raised because the parents aren't raised. Anyways, that's all side topics we can get into. Now, so this is the Apep Isfet symbolism again, carrying on from the path of Apep Isfet, and you're going to allow that as a reciprocity mechanism. Instead of sending things back, well, you're just keeping it there, and then they're just going to create more and more and more negatives. So the injustice remains, and evil gains a foothold, because no one's stopping the evil, so evil is going to be like, all right, I got free reign, I can just keep doing it. I can just keep violating and violating and no one's stopping me. Well, why would I stop? I'm benefiting from this. So I'm going to keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. There's no consequences to me. Why would I stop? I'm doing it for a reason. There's a benefit that I initially desired and cared for in my corrupt, isfet, dark, chaotic desires. Well, I wanted something and I got it. And it was immoral and I violated rights, but no one stopped me. So I'm going to keep doing it. Keep doing it and keep doing it. So evil gains a foothold and slavery increases in an area. And then we get the chaos as the aggregate karma. Because if they do it to one person, then they do it to more people and more people and more people and more people, and everyone lets it happen, well then that's your condition that you live in. You live in a condition of immorality being done to everybody. And that's our current condition because of the belief in authority, where some are believed to have the moral right to do wrongs, and other people don't have the right because they don't actually have the right to do those wrongs. But there's a certain class of people, oh, well, you're allowed to do them because you're authority, and magically you're allowed to do it. So some have rights and others don't, and that's Animal Farm. All animals are created equal, but some animals are more equal than others. So then you have this class of people who can do things that other people aren't allowed to do because it's immoral and you're not allowed to do it. Or they're going to make you do things that are immoral or prevent you from doing things that are moral that you do have a right to do. So as opposed to the corrective path where it creates personal justice for an individual, the left-hand path leaves personal injustice. So it's personally unfair and collectively fair. So I'm going to explain that when I get to the middle part of the infographic and how this is all justice, as I mentioned earlier and in previous parts of the Law of Freedom presentation. So instead of conduction of the direct negative karmic consequences, you're going to conduct it right back to them. Well, the ones who did the violations, now they're insulated. They're not receiving direct negative karmic consequences being feedback to the violators. The karma, the negative karma they created, karma is an action or deed. So they created a negative immoral action or deed. It affected one or more people over here. So the negative consequences of your actions were that it affected these people, and these people are negatively affected. Chaos was created, a violation of their rights. And karma remains there. Because when you're doing it to everybody and no one stops it, well, the karma isn't sent back to the violators in a rectification process to localize it back to them and make them stop. No, instead they just keep repeating it and it ends up everywhere across society. So there's an insulation of direct negative karmic consequences feedback to the violators. Karma is dispersed to all. And this is a collective reaping. So in the positive pathway, it's an individual reaping where direct karmic consequences are going to be brought back to the violators to make them stop. It's direct on them individually as a response. When that is not engaged in, what you have is a collective reaping overall. When the behavior is that the evil, the immorality, the violators are violating everyone because they weren't stopped the first time, so they just kept repeating it. And then whatever means, whether it's linguistic or sorcery, magic of the mind through words and getting people to accept ideas as legitimate, like the belief in the legitimacy of authority, or other means. If people are going to accept it either way overall in that society, whether they're afraid or they think it's right, and they falsely believe it's right, it's still a collective reaping. So no matter which side you choose, overall we do it to ourselves by action or inaction response. So this is universal justice, as I termed it. The concept of a universal justice. Either way, this is justice. It's not going to be personal justice, right? In personal justice, the violators are the ones who are going to get the justice back to them. So that's why here, when you go to the blue path, well, who's getting justice, right? We're talking about the law of freedom, justice in purple. So we have universal justice overall is this whole thing. But who's getting the justice applied? Well, when you choose the right-hand path and the violators get stopped and get punished and they get consequences, then the justice is applying to those violators. They are getting justice applied. But when that's not done, then the justice is being applied to everyone. Not in terms of personal justice, not that people deserve necessarily being violated, but they're going to deserve continuing to allow it and continuing to create that condition that they live in, where it's the condition of reality, where everyone is being violated. And that's where overall we do it to ourselves by action or inaction. Because you chose, maybe not as an individual, but overall, right? You have one person versus a million, what are you going to do? Well, you're not going to change the condition just yourself. You need numbers. This is why we have to influence people and educate them and change their mind, the mental realm, to then change their thoughts and what they care about that will then lead to their actions and what they do in the world, right? So it's not a personal justice that you got violated and that's justice that you got violated. No, that's not what this means. It's an injustice. But because you're choosing to leave the personal injustice, what you're getting is an aggregate condition of evil gaining a foothold and being allowed to repeat its behavior. So aggregately, that behavior is going to repeat and it's going to affect everyone or nearly everyone. And that's the justice of the law of freedom. Either way, there's justice in a sense of justice, not in the justice in the way that most people think of it as justice, as a more narrow, colloquial standard definition of justice, where a violator does something and they receive consequences for their violation, right? That's how most people view justice. And yes, that is an accurate way. That is the optimal, ideal way for justice to be applied, is that justice goes back to the violator and only they have the justice for their injustice. But when this has failed to be engaged, I'm just explaining how the law of freedom operates in terms of justice and what's just. Because everyone is too cowardly to stand together and unite and stop the violators from violating, well, that's the justice you created for yourself according to the law of freedom, according to the way the universe actually works, by allowing whatever we create, by allowing whatever behaviors get created. Well, it's up to free will. I've gone into this in karma and free will. I think that's part 5 in this series. It's going to continue unless free will makes it stop. So free will creates the immorality. Free will creates the negative karma. Free will creates the chaos, the injustice. Well, you need free will to counter that, to bring back balance, the 1-to-1 ratio. Because that's what the justice is about, the scales of Ma'at, the justice card of the tarot with the sword and the scales. It's the 1-to-1 ratio of evil is done, you don't tolerate it, you bring back the negative karma by making them face the consequences of their actions, and you put it down to make them not repeat it. And if you choose not to do that, then you're getting a universal, the negative aspect of the universal justice, where we are overall doing it to ourselves, not as an individual, 1 against 1,000,000 or 1 against 1,000, 1 against 100, a few 100,000, okay? Against the police everywhere and everything. It's a losing battle. You can't do it on a one-on against them. It requires numbers. Everything's about numbers. The principle of quantity, as I call it. The principle of numbers. You can call it the principle of the majority. Many different things. Whatever the majority are going to do, whether it's right or wrong, whether it's good or evil, moral or immoral, it doesn't matter in terms of what's going to be created in reality. The way reality, the way our human world, the way a society, the way an area is going to experience a condition is based on what the majority do. That's it. And that's how the law of freedom is operating. This is what the universal justice is about, is that it's justice because overall, people are not doing anything about it. So it remains and it continues. And that's universal justice. It's not the personal justice being created, but it's personal justice operates within universal justice, right? The symbolism of Ma'at and the sword and the scales, that's truth and justice, right? Truth or consequence, truth and justice. That still applies in the personal sense, and that's within the umbrella of universal justice. But universal justice also has this negative side where inaction, cowardice, fear, laziness, apathy, ignorance all play a part. Those 5 killers of consciousness are the apathy, ignorance, laziness, cowardice, and ultimately all comes from fear as like a force or power within us, within our mindsets that's driving it all. Those 5 aspects are what is leading to this negative aspect of universal justice. So I think I've done a pretty good job explaining the infographics, and that's the end of my presentation. So thank you for your time and attention. I appreciate your time and attention, and hopefully you gain something of value. And there will be a part 8 and maybe a part 9. I'm not sure. Definitely a part 8, probably a part 9, maybe a part 10. I don't know. The Law of Freedom one is, I'm going really deep into it, and yeah, it's really big. So far we're up to 7 hours in total, and definitely going to get to 8 hours. So thank you for your time and attention. Take care. Peace.